Stephanie, you let me know when everybody's in.
Everyone is in now.
Great. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the March 9th, 2023 Connecticut Paid Leave Board of Directors meeting. I would like to call the meeting to order. It is 9:02, and Amber, would you kindly take attendance?
Yes, thank you, Fran. Okay, Ava Bermuda Zimmerman.
Present.
Isha Canada.
Present.
Adrienne Cochran.
Present.
Britt Marie Cole Johnson.
Present.
Andrea Comer.
I'm here. Good morning.
Good morning. Michelle Gilman.
Present.
Sheila Hummel.
Present.
Sal Luciano. I don't believe Sal's joined us yet. Ellen McKitterick.
Present.
Fran Pastore.
Present.
John Scott. I don't believe John has joined us yet. Mike Soltis.
Here.
Molly Weston Williamson.
Present.
Holly Williams. Holly Williams.
There's Sal.
Oh, thank you. Good morning, Sal. We're just doing attendance. Can you say present just for the attendance?
Present.
Thank you. Good morning, Justin Zartman.
Present.
Thank you. And has Holly joined us yet? Not yet, but we'll keep an eye out for her. We have a quorum. Thanks, Fran.
Thank you, Amber. I'd like to thank the members of the public for joining us this morning. And we're going to get right into our meeting. May I have a motion, please, to approve the February 9th meeting minutes, which were distributed last week?
So moved, Sal Luciano.
Are there any corrections or further? May I have a second?
I'll second. Andrea Comer.
Thanks, Andrea. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? No opposition. Thank you. The motion carries.
I just want to abstain since I was not at the meeting last month.
I essentially did too. So
No, thanks.
I would like to abstain as well, Mike.
okay, Harindra and the consultants from Spring Group, would you kindly provide the quarterly update?
Thank you. Yes, we will do that. I'm just trying to share my screen. If you don't mind granting me access, allow me to share my screen.
You're all set, Harindra.
Thank you. Okay, so hopefully everyone can see my screen. So the goal of our pod today is to present a quarterly report, effectively showing results from July 2022 through December 2022. So basically the first 2 quarters of the fiscal year. The results we're showing are on an accrued basis, so which is going to be different from some of the results that perhaps Dave will be sharing, which is on a paid basis. So effectively what that means is, as an example, if contributions were received in January in respect of, let's say, the period October through December, we would reflect that in that period October through December. So as opposed to January, because therefore the period October through December. So just wanted to make sure that was clear as we got into this as well. So the basic agenda is that we're presenting the results and talk a bit about the fund balance. And then we also have a budget projection as well. And then there'll be time for questions at the end. Okay, so I'll start with the key results. Overall, the fund balance at the beginning of the year was $446.3 million. So this is as of June 30th, 2022 or July 1st, 2022. We have 2 columns here, one, the actual results that we're presenting right now, as well as the projection or the updated projection that was presented back in January 2023. So you have a bit of a comparison of actual compared to that prior projection. The activity is shown sort of in the middle of this first table here. So we have contributions earned of 198.3 million, investment income of 6.1 million, incurred claims of 143.4 million, and other expenses of 22.6. So net activity overall was 38.4, primarily driven by lower contributions, lower claims compared to what was in the prior projection. We expected that because our projections always have a little bit of conservatism built into, particularly the claims side. So that's not unexpected, but just to note that we do have some conservatism built into our projections because we're looking at the fund status and we want to be conservative in projecting those the fund balance. And the way to be conservative is to have higher claims, and then if actual is lower than expected, it's good news overall. So our net activity, if you take the contributions earned plus investment income minus the claims and expenses, we have a net activity of 38.4 million. So our fund balance as of December 2022, December 31st, 2022, is 484.7 million. So a small increase given that the net activity was positive. Overall, when we look at our funding metrics that we had set up previously and we continue to monitor, across the board, we continue to meet the targets, or we continue to be less than the targets that we have. So in other words, we meet the targets, which tells us that the fund continues to be strong and continues to be in a strong position so far. So that is the overall result and really the main item that I'm presenting today. Okay. Go to the next page. This graphic, it illustrates the same numbers that I showed before at a high level. So we have, if you look at the items on the left-hand side, that's the actual. And then the items on the right-hand side, it represents the financial projection that was presented previously. So same numbers as the prior page. We start off with 446.3 million, which is the fund balance, the total revenue, 204.4 million. A reduction due to claims and other expenses of 166.1 million, resulting in 484.7 million as fund balance as of December 2022. Yeah. But the similar illustration on the financial projection, where we started off with 446 million, had revenue of 213 million, expenses of 182 million, resulting in a net balance of 477 million. Okay. Keep going. This page, I won't get into any detail on this page, but this is intended to provide the detail behind those numbers. So as an example, we do have all the other expenses broken out under expenses under B. So you can see, as an example, the administration expenses, the claims expenses, claims administration that's paid to Aflac, it's about 11.4 million, et cetera. So you can see those items down there. And then I'll just highlight one other item here related to the claims benefit payments. So paid claims were 142.4 million. And we also had an increase in the reserve compared to compared to June 2022, increase of 1 million. So our reserve number was 40 million as of June 2022. That's gone up by 1 million to 41 million as a result of this. And that is fairly in line with where we had that projection, where we had a small increase of 0.7 million expected. So, and again, the results here show the fund balance of 484.7. Okay. Okay. The second item outside of the actual results that we're presenting here is an updated projection for the full 12-month period, July 2022 to June 2023. You'll see here the fund balance as of June continues is the same number. It's 446.3 million. Our updated net activity is at 79.8 million, and that is contributions earned not changed at 443 million. So that's new contributions during a 12-month period that ends June 2023. Investment income is a little bit higher given the current market expectations and what we've seen so far. So that's 14.9 million. And incurred claims have decreased a little bit. And that again is driven by a little bit of conservatism built into our projections. We continue to reflect actual results, which are coming in lower than expected or than what is in our projection. So we lowered that a little bit to 332.7 million. And other expenses are relatively the same, slightly lower. So overall net activity 79.8 million. So we're projecting a fund balance of 526.1 million. And we continue to expect to update this every quarter as we continue to get more data based on the emerging experience. Okay. So that brings me to the end of what we had to present. I'll open it up for questions.
Thank you. Any questions for Harindra? All right, well then I think you did a good job, Harindra. Thank you so much. That was very detailed and robust. And any comments or feedback whatsoever? Okay, thank you. Moving right along. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Michael, would you please provide the update on the comments that we received in connection with the audit for the private plan?
Absolutely. Thank you so much. And good morning, everybody. I'm going to, Amber, could you, or Stephanie, could you give me the ability to share?
You have ability to share, Michael.
All right, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Can everyone see this PowerPoint?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So as everyone remembers, or I hope everyone remembers, a couple months ago, we had posted for public comment in the Connecticut Law Journal the private plan audit guide. It was sort of a walk through the whole process of the audits that we intend to undertake with relation to private plans. So we did receive some comments during the comment period, about a dozen of them, I think mostly from the insurance industry. So I'm just going to walk through those comments with the board. The comments themselves, I've sort of summarized. I didn't want to have to copy the entire thing or read through the whole comment, but it's sort of capturing the intent of the comment. I'll also provide, they can be kind of granular, so I'll provide sort of the context of the comment and then provide a response. And I'll try and do it in maybe 11 minutes or less. If there are any questions, comments, feel free to interrupt me, but obviously at the end, I'll have the opportunity to provide any answers. The first comment was related to the kickoff meeting. So this is the first meeting we have with the target of the audit as we walk through the entire process of the audit, kind of have them understanding of what's going on. And we built flexibility into the guide to potentially change what's on the agenda for that meeting. And the request was for more details about what that agenda might be changed to. To be honest with you, we don't know exactly what changes we'll make. The intent of that flexibility was really twofold. One, any lessons we learn as we go through an audit, from one audit to the next, we want to make sure we can adjust. Anything we want to highlight, maybe we can, ignore in the kickoff meeting, that's sort of lessons learned. We want to make sure we can adjust the kickoff meeting to address what's the most helpful. And then the second thing we wanted that flexibility for is for any individual employer needs. Perhaps they can't do one meeting and they have to split up into 3 meetings. Perhaps we need to meet in person. Just having flexibility built in. So we don't know exactly where the flexibility will take us, but the intent is not to change sort of the intent of that kickoff meeting. It's more to be able to adjust to the needs of the employer. The second series of comments were related to how documents were shared with the authority. The 3 kind of topics were allowing a secure documentation sharing, making sure that any personal information is kept secure, potentially providing alternative access through perhaps a virtual access to a claim system rather than sending a claim file, and then making sure that we could receive documents directly from a claims administrator, insurer, third-party administrator, rather than having it have to come through the employer as part of the audit. We understand all those comments and we're on board. We have a technological solution that's secure, allows us to transfer documents securely, review the documents securely, and receive the documents from any party that we send the request to, so it doesn't have to be from the employer. And in addition, we're open to conversations about any alternative forms of providing the access, whether it's a virtual access or a claim file. We would just want to have that conversation individually in the kickoff meeting if for some reason the claim files isn't the best way to approach that access. The next few comments were related to the application audit. So this is an audit where we make sure that the appropriate process was followed prior to the application of the private plan being submitted to the authority. And these comments are related to mostly to the survey that we ask of employees to make sure that they receive the documents they're supposed to and they had the opportunity to vote on the plan. So one of the comments is very specific, adding electronic to the reference to written within one of the survey questions. To be honest with you, we felt like electronic communication is also a form of written communication. Written doesn't just mean handwritten or printed. So we did not make that change, but the intent was that written could include electronic versions of documents. The second comment was related to a survey question about whether employees remembered if they had the ability to vote. And the request was whether the question could be adjusted for an employer to indicate the date of the vote. We understand that concern. We don't want to make that specific change because we didn't want to have separate questions for each employer. We wanted to have kind of one survey that we can use in every single audit of this type. So as an alternative, one option we're allowing is that employers can supplement when they send the survey to employees. They can provide additional information that can include the date that the vote happened, maybe the reference to the date they received materials. We just only ask that the authority be able to review that communication to make sure it's accurate and not misleading. And then the other option, it's not just a yes or no question. Did you vote? You could also answer, I did not recall or do not recall. So that's an option available to employees. And then sort of in a similar vein, a request for alternative proof of the employee vote rather than just a survey question. And that's sort of provided directly by the employer, perhaps a copy of the email that was sent to all employees. The authority agrees with that. And we actually updated our checklist to say, if the survey is inconclusive, we'll be happy to accept alternative proof that the documents are shared, that the vote occurred. So we would be willing to accept that. These next two comments are related to, they're not actually for the same audit, but they're sort of about funds and proof of the appropriate use of funds. So I've grouped them together. The first one is related to the contribution audit. And there was a reference to a segregated bank account for funds. So the request was deleting that reference because there was no requirement that the bank account be segregated from other funds that the employer has access to. And we agree with that idea. It is not required that there is a segregated bank account for employee contributions. However, we don't want to remove it because the context makes it clear that it's not a requirement. Essentially, what we ask is that employers prove to us they have protocols in place to make sure they're not withholding more funds than they're supposed to from employees, and that the funds are being used for plan-related purposes. If they cannot show that protocols are in place, we may ask for alternative documentation. One of those examples of what they can provide is a segregated bank account. That is a way to show that funds are only being used for plan-related purposes. So we wanted to keep that as an example of what they could provide, but it's not mandated at this time. So we did not make a change to the audit guide for that. And sort of a similar idea for the second comment. This one is related to, we had asked for potentially an actuarial analysis, other documentation as part of the solvency audit for self-funded plans. So essentially, we ask any audit participant who is a self-funded self-funded plan to provide documentation that they have considered the amount of the cost of the plan, and it's a reasonable expectation that they'll be able to pay those expenses. They have certified as part of the application process that they have the ability to provide those funds and pay benefits. We're just asking them for documentation of that they have considered it. One of that forms of documentation can be an actuarial analysis. So once again, it's one of those things where it's an example of what they can provide. We wanted to give them an idea of what types of things we were looking for, but it isn't a requirement specifically that there be an actuarial analysis. We just would expect them to have some documentation that they have thought about this and that it was reasonable. The next couple of comments are about the claim documentation. So this would be the claims audit. The way the process works is we have an initial request for a listing of all claims that were filed during the audit window. From that list, we would then ask for particular claim files, a sample of them, just to kind of review those specific files. So the first comment was about that initial list. We have a template report that just sort of references the documents or the columns we would like to see in that report. And the request was if there's flexibility in what that report looks like. Yes, we're absolutely open to that. We like to keep the template as it is in the current audit guide, just as an example of the type of thing we're looking for. But during the kickoff meeting, we'll be happy to discuss alternate templates or alternate forms of providing, as long as it's sort of an individualized list that allows us to pick which claims we would like to look at more closely. The second comment was related to documentation that we might request. And we had indicated we would like to receive all documentation that was provided to support the claim. And alternative language that was requested by the commenter was that we say all documentation is provided to support the claim decision rather than support the claim, or alternatively, all documentation provided by the claimant. Honestly, I don't know what the difference between the documentation to support the claim versus documentation to support the claim decision, but I think we'd prefer to receive the documentation to support the claim. If the carrier or employer asked for this documentation, we would like to receive it, or if the employee felt they needed to provide it, we'd like to see it, and we don't want to narrow it down and eliminate anything that would be impactful to what happened on that claim. And additionally, we wouldn't be able to just limit it to things provided by the claimant, because some of these documents might be provided by a third party, healthcare provider. Or in the case of a TPA who's administering the claims, maybe the documentation is coming from the employer about the wages earned, and we want to be able to look at that. So it wouldn't just be the documents provided by the claimant. So we weren't able to make those changes. And the last comment was very specific to an intermittent leaves. Generally, there tends to be 2 approvals or more approvals for intermittent leaves. There's the initial approval of a window of time that they can take leave, and then potentially the individual absences. So, over the next 6 months, the employee can take 1 absence a week for 1 day. That's sort of the first approval. And then when they actually use those absences, they might have a separate approval process. And the request was related to which approval or denial would we want to receive. The authority would want to be able to review both. We just want to make sure that employees receive the benefits to which they are entitled, so that kind of both the original approval and then each individual instance of absence we would like to be able to receive documentation of. And then the last comment for the claims audit was related to a sort of list at the end of our listed documents that we would ask for, that asks for any other documentation. There's a fairly broad list that we may ask for as part of a claims audit. And the comment was about it was very broad and potentially work against public policy to ask for that much information. And we understand that concern, but the intent of that language was just meant if what we were initially provided, if what a carrier or employer includes in their claim files is not enough for us to determine whether the claim was paid appropriately, we may ask for alternate documentation, additional documentation to supplement the information we were provided, basically trying to understand what happened on that claim. We didn't want to limit what other things we may ask for because we don't know what might be out there. So it's just sort of, we understand it is broad and we don't intend to use it every single time. It's mostly, it's entirely meant to just make sure we understood what happened with the claim. So we may ask initially for, A through G, but maybe we need a few more things because it's not sufficient for us to understand what happened on the claim. So we do not intend to overuse that or ask for a wild amount of documentation. It's just allowing us to supplement it if we did not receive enough in the first pass. And then there's the final slide, I promise. This is about the reports. So at the end of the audit, the process would be the authority would issue an initial draft of the report. And then we would provide the opportunity for the employer to respond, comment, ask questions, clarify anything that happened before the authority issues the final version of the report. And the comment was that the insurance carrier or TPA should be allowed to also respond to the initial draft of the report. Generally, we agree with the concept, but ultimately the employers are the ones responsible for the private plan and maintaining compliance with the applicable law. They're the ones who have certified that they are able to do this. So the response really should come from them. We are open to having the TPAs or insurers assist them in that response, or asking the employer can ask the TPA to provide the response, create on their behalf. And we'll honestly be able to, we'll take their thoughts in mind as well, but the official response should be coming from the employer because they're the ones who are on the hook for the plan. And then last comment, related to FOIA and confidentiality. There was a request that the final report be kept confidential as an internal document to the agency, because claims material, trade secrets should be kept exempt from FOIA requests. Reports may contain sensitive or confidential information. The authority totally understands. We do intend to maintain confidentiality when appropriate when we draft these reports. The reports, we have no intention of having these reports talk about individual claimants, personal details. I can't imagine a situation where we'd ever have a social security number or medical information about an individual employee in the report. It's meant to be conclusions. We did review the protocols about contributions. We determined that they were sufficient to make sure that the appropriate contributions were withheld from employees. That type of information, not the sort of detailed information that would upset confidential information. And then I know this wasn't the intent, but I just want to make it clear. The authority has to comply with the requirements of the Freedom of Information Act. We can't change the compliance rules, or we can't avoid compliance by labeling a document something that it isn't, and just calling it an internal document and therefore avoid sharing it under Freedom of Information Act. So I don't think anyone is thought that we were doing that. I just want to be clear because the comments sort of suggested it. So that's it for my presentation. Happy to take any questions the board may have.
Thank you, Michael. Are there any questions for Michael on this report? Again, very thorough and like every single thing is addressed, I think. But I'm sure some members of the team will have some questions. No?
Like Molly does.
Oh, Molly, I didn't see your hands. I'm sorry.
Oh, no problem. I think just a quick, I think on slide 5, there were a couple of comments about how segregated bank accounts and actuarial analyses are not currently required. It seems like it's not within the scope of the audit guide, but it would be worth considering for the future whether it made sense to require either of those things. And maybe over the course of the initial audits, that could be a way to gather some data about whether that would seem like a helpful practice for the future. But I mean, that's way outside the scope of the audit guide. It just seems like something good to flag for the future.
Yeah, I think that makes sense, a lot of sense. Appreciate that. I think even said it like at the moment they're not required, but I think that's something we want to explore. And if we learn anything from the audit that says this is something we absolutely need to mandate, we can obviously pursue that. So thank you for that comment.
Thanks, Molly. Anyone else? I don't see any hands. Hi, John. I didn't see you before. Amber, did you see that John was here? Great.
Yeah, she let me in. Thank you. Sorry,
Okay.
the first call ran long.
No problem. Okay, so may I have a motion to adopt the private plan audit guide?
Motion.
Thank you, Molly. May I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions?
I'm going to abstain.
Okay, thank you, John. All right, the motion carries. We're going to move right on to item 6, the committee reports. Mike, policy and personnel.
Good morning. The committee met this week and discussed the update on comments received in connection with the private plan audit guide, which we just voted on.
Okay. Moving right along, Molly, for outreach and engagement.
Sure. The committee met last month, and we were especially glad to welcome Isha to her first committee meeting for the committee. We got a great update on outreach and legislative work, on all the great work Nancy's been doing on the podcast, and are continuing to talk about ways to use social media data to influence outreach.
Just a comment from me, I think the social media has been fantastic, the Twitter and the Instagram. Of course, I follow you guys and try to retweet and comment when I can, but I think it's great. I love all the different topics and how you're tying different constituencies and reaching out to different constituencies with specific messaging. So great job. Thank you. All right, Holly, finance and audit.
Yes, thank you. The committee met last month and received the quarterly actuary update as well as updates on fund recovery and the financial reports. And Dave is going to walk us through those financial reports this morning.
Thank you. Dave, take it away.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. Just share my screen.
We can see your screen, Dave.
Thank you for the confirmation, Amber. Appreciate it. Okay, so we're going to talk about financial results for the month of January with a preview of February and end up with how we think we're projecting by the end of the year. For the month of January, the expenditures were $1.1 million. We had net activity of $3.9 million. And so we were better than budget by $462,000. It was the typical category of expenses that we had in the month of January: salary and related expenses, licenses, including our annual Salesforce license, contact center, and outreach. For year to date so far, our net activity has been $8.4 million. And so we are ahead of budget by $4.4 million. Moving on to the bond activity, we spent $137,000 of bond money in the month of January. Most of that was for the fund recovery work we're doing. And to date, year to date, we've spent over $900,000. We had budgeted $3.7 million. We haven't spent that much yet, but we are still working on several projects. So we expect that variance to decrease as the fiscal year goes on. In terms of how much money we have left of the bond funds, out of the $16 million that's been allocated so far, we have spent about $12.1 million. So there's $3.9 million remaining as we work on various projects, including fund recovery, claim integration, and the web redesign and replatforming. Moving on to our contribution activity for the month of January, we received $93.7 million for the month of January. That was less than what we had budgeted by about $10.6 million. That was partially offset by the investment income of $1.6 million. The other significant activity for the month was the benefit payments that were made. That was a little less than $21.5 million. That was also less than what we budgeted, and that was almost $60 million less than budgeted. So that offset the less than budgeted amount for the contribution revenue. So in all, for the month, we had activity of $66.9 million compared to a budget of almost 60. So we were ahead by just under $7 million for the month. Year to date, our activity has been $117,000, and that's $86 million. We were $117 million of activity so far, and that's $86 million ahead of budget. Again, primarily driven by the lower than budgeted amount of benefit claims paid. As far as where the contribution fund account itself is, we are at $500.3 million as of the end of January. The two main drivers, of course, are contribution revenue, which is over $821 million since inception, and benefit claims paid, which was over $266 million through the end of January. Just as a side note, I am happy to report that we did reach over $300 million for benefits paid as of the end of last week. So that was a significant milestone for us here at the authority. Just a quick look at the balance sheet. Total assets are $526 million. The largest asset continues to be the short-term investment fund at $481 million. The interest rate on that is north of 4% as the favorable and interest rate environment continues to happen in the economy. As far as a quick preview of February, nothing unusual there. $752,000 of operating expenses typical categories for the authority. Benefits that were paid was $23.1 million. That's a little higher than the typical run rate we've seen in the past few months of about $22 million. We have seen an uptick in the past few weeks of benefits being paid. Normally, the amount would be in the high fives, high $5 million numbers in terms of the weekly benefits paid, 5.7, 5.8. Now we're starting to see that tick up a little bit in the last few weeks. It's in the low sixes, like about $6.1 million. So will that be a trend going forward? We're certainly going to monitor that, but that's what we've been seeing so far in the past few weeks. We'll definitely keep you posted as that happens. And as far as where we think we're going to be at the end of the fiscal year in terms of our operating budget, we continue to believe that we'll be ahead of our budget of almost $3 million. We believe we'll be about $2.8 million better. That's continues to be driven primarily by our updated staffing assumptions. We're hiring people later than the budget had assumed. And so that's really the biggest driver of it. And as far as where we think we'll be in terms of the contribution budget by the end of the year, we think we'll be at about almost $73.7 million of net contribution activity compared to the budget, which was a negative 54.7. So we believe we'll be about $128 million ahead of budget by the end of the fiscal year. That's where we are and where we think we'll be by the end of the year. Does anybody have any questions?
Thank you, Dave. Anybody have any questions for Dave? I don't see any hands up. Okay, we're going to move along to the CEO report. Erin.
Good morning. I'm actually joining you from Seattle because I'll be participating in a convening of paid leave administrators later today. It's being paid for by University of Washington and the Evans School, which is lovely. One of the ways I'm able to participate, but I'm looking forward to meeting with our colleagues in other states and learning from them and sharing our experience. Before I head over to the Evans School, I also will be participating in a hearing at the Labor and Public Employees Committee meeting at 10 regarding Senate Bill 1179, which is a labor committee bill that is intended to clarify 3 points: the definition of municipality, to create a mechanism for tribal enterprises and tribal government employees to participate if they opt in, and to provide clarification about under what circumstances employer administered plans and insurance policies can offset against CT paid leave benefits. So I said this is a labor bill, but our goal is to make sure that that we're implementing the program the legislature wants. So that's kind of our role in this process. So that's what's going on with me this morning. I wanted to make sure that I introduced Madeline Granado, who's our new Government and Community Relations Manager, to all of you. Madeline joins us from Guelph, where she was their policy director and notably led the coalition to bring paid leave to Connecticut. So she's been a longtime friend, longtime advocate of the paid leave program, and we can't be happier to have her join us. So especially me, I'm so excited to not be doing the legislative stuff on my own. So please join me in welcoming Maddie. Quick reminder, in May, we will have the deadline to file your statements of financial interest. We will be sending out that reminder by email. It's the same thing that you've all completed in the past, but as you're working on your taxes, it's always a good time to just be aware that that's going to become due. And so sometimes it's easier to just be thinking about it as you're doing your taxes. And I think that is it for my update. Does anyone have any questions for me? Molly?
Just a super quick one. What was the bill number that you mentioned that you're testifying on?
Senate Bill 1179.
And are you testifying in favor, against?
Yes, we're offering support because it offers again, it provides clarity, and we think things that are clear are better than things that are confusing. So that is what we're working to try to achieve. There are several dozen other bills that we're watching and paying attention to, but this is the only one so far that really has a direct impact on our operations that we're testifying on. Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. Anyone else? Question for Erin? Okay, Erin, I'm just glad to see that Connecticut is taking a leadership role in supporting work in other states. Great, and glad to see you elevating your profile and the Connecticut brand. So thank you. Any old business to address? Any new business? All right. May I have a motion to adjourn, please?
Luciano, so moved.
Thank you, Sal. A second?
A second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? And the motion carries. The time is 9:43 and the meeting is adjourned. Everybody gets 15 minutes back in their day. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
you.
Erin, good luck and great job today
Thanks so much,
everyone.
for the state of Washington. Thank you.